The man who plays golf, he neglects his business, he forsakes his wife, he forgets his God. He did not seem to realize that it is the chief aim of many a modern capitalist life to forget all three. This abandonment of boyish vanity and work, this substitution of a senile vanity and indolence, this is the first respect in which the rich Englishman has fallen. He was more of a man when he was at least a master workman and not merely a master. And the second important respect in which he was better at the beginning is this, that he did then in some hazy way half believe that he was enriching other people as well as himself. The optimism of the early Victorian individual was not wholly hypocritical. Some of the clearest-headed and blackest-hearted of them, such as Malthus, saw where things were going and boldly based their Manchester city on pessimism instead of optimism. But this was not the general case. Most of the decent rich of the Bright and Cobden sort did have a kind of confused faith that the economic conflict would work well in the long run for everybody. They thought the troubles of the poor were incurable by state action. They thought that of all troubles. But they did not cold-bloodedly contemplate the prospect of those troubles growing worse and worse. By one of those tricks or illusions of the brain to which the luxurious are subject in all ages, they sometimes seem to feel as if the populace had triumphed symbolically in their own persons. They blasphemously thought about their thrones of gold what can only be said about a cross, that they being lifted up would draw all men after them. They were so full of the romance that anybody could be Lord Mayor, that they seemed to have slipped into thinking that everybody could. It seemed as if 100 Dick Whittingtons, accompanied by 100 cats, could all be accommodated at the Mansion House. It was all nonsense, but it was not, until later, humbug.
If somebody says a rickety cradle may mean a rickety baby, the natural deduction one would think would be to give the people a good cradle, or give them money enough to buy one. But that means higher wages and greater equalization of wealth, and the plutocratic scientist, with a slightly troubled expression, turns his eyes and pince-nez in another direction. Reduced to brutal terms of truth, his difficulty is this, and simply this. More food, leisure, and money for the workman would mean a better workman, better even from the point of view of anyone for whom he worked. But more food, leisure, and money would also mean a more independent workman. A house with a decent fire and a full pantry would be a better house to make a chair or mend a clock in, even from the customer's point of view, than a hovel with a leaky roof and a cold hearth. But a house with a decent fire and a full pantry would also be a better house in which to refuse to make a chair or mend a clock. A much better house to do nothing in, and doing nothing is sometimes one of the highest of the duties of man.
So it says, "Holy is your name, your kingdom come." Now, this word kingdom, to use this in the, the third line of a prayer, to use a word in the first century, for a Jewish rabbi to use this word, this is so loaded, dangerous, this is such a political word at that time. The fact that the prayer right away goes from our Father, Father of us in heaven, holy is your name, your kingdom come. Because first off, these Jewish people in the first century had been conquered by the Romans, this absolutely dominant military superpower. The Romans then were essentially ruling from afar through the Herodians, which were a dynasty begun by Herod the Great. And then Herod the Great, when he died in the year 4, his kingdom was divided into 3. One of his sons, Philip, took a region to the east. Archelaus took Jerusalem, Judea, but that didn't go so well. And then Herod's third son, Antipas, he took over the Galilee region. So when Jesus, a first century Jewish rabbi from Galilee, speaks of a kingdom, the Romans are sort of right there, but it's Herod Antipas who was building his own kingdom and that Jesus' work was done right under the nose of Antipas. In fact, at one point, people come to Jesus and they say, Herod Antipas wants to kill you. Actually, we'll have to do a whole episode on that. But Antipas was ruthless, he was violent, and any threat to his kingdom meant you were going to get killed. Herod Antipas is the one who killed John the Baptist. So this had already happened, people being killed left and right because they were a threat.
You prosecute the man or woman who steals the goose from off the common, but leave the larger felon loose who steals the common from the goose.
Equilibrium Piaget, imbalance Heider, dissonance Festinger, uncertainty Van den Bosch, anxiety Janoff Bowman, anxious uncertainty McGregor.
What is hope? Honestly, it's a bit of a burden. Sometimes it would be nice to just give up, but hope always gets in the way.
Are humans selfish?
Are dogs acting selfishly when a bell makes them salivate?
If a system conditions you to act in a certain way.
Does that say anything about your true nature?
What gives you purpose?
People think we stick around after death because we can't let go of the past.
But we're not nostalgic for the lives we had.
We're haunted by the futures that were stolen from us.
What makes you sad?
Most things about the world we live in just make me angry. What makes me sad is the worlds we deny ourselves, when we mistake our lack of imagination for evidence of what is possible.
What is hope?
Hope inspires action. Action creates the possibility of change, and the possibility of change inspires hope.
How can I find something?
People regularly search for answers without realizing that if you ask yourself something, you get to decide what the response is. What's the meaning of life is not a quiz question. It's a creative writing assignment.
What inspires you about humans?
The people up here in the north live in quiet, cold darkness. But all it takes is a few rays of sun peeking through the clouds for them to spring back into life. The human spirit may sometimes go dormant, but it is always only a crack of light away from returning.
And we'll pray all damn day, every day, that all the shit our president has got us in will go away, while we strive to figure out a way we can survive these trying times without losing our minds. So if you want to burn yourself, remember that I love you. And if you want to cut yourself, remember that I love you. If you want to kill yourself, remember that I love you. Call me up before you're dead, we can make some plans instead. Send me an IM, I'll be your friend. Shysters live from scheme to scheme, but my fourth quarter pipe dreams are seeming more and more worth fighting for. So I'll curate some situations, make my job a big vacation, and I'll say fuck Trump and fuck this war. My war paint is Sharpie ink, and I'll show you how much my shit stinks and ask you what you think, because your thoughts and words are powerful. They think we're disposable, while both my thumbs opposable, spelled out on a double word and triple letter score. And we won't stop until somebody calls the cops, and even then we'll start again and just pretend that nothing ever happened. We won't stop until somebody calls the cops, and even then we'll start again and just pretend that nothing ever happened. We're just dancing, we're just hugging, singing, screaming, kissing, tugging on the sleeve of how it used to be.
I think bullies are very insecure. They want to feel in power, and they're actually powerless. And so they create scenarios to have power over other people, to feel like they're in control. You know, they're very insecure. I think we've all bullied at some time, whether it be one person or a group of people or, you know, in a relationship. I think we've all are at fault of it because we want to feel a sense of control or power or certainty.
Okay, here's my hot take for the left. We need to start planning churches. And I mean that seriously. Same concept. If you take the same exact concept and structure of a church, but you take away the religion and, you know, the preaching of telling you how to live your life, and you fill those gaps with, you know, ways of helping your community and having resources and, you know, still a lot of the same things of, you know, churches are childcare, churches provide food, churches, you know, say what you want, but churches do actually, you know, they are actually a great community space and an incredible, actually, option for a third space. And if there's one thing I learned, I was involved in the church for over 20 years, and you know, one of the hardest parts about leaving the church was leaving that community. And I think a lot of people agree with me on that. If they have also left the church, that was the hardest part. I have a million examples running through my head right now, but you know, a general concept is you walk in, it's 8 a.m. on a Sunday, just like church. People greet you at the door, you're handed a pamphlet about whatever issue we're talking about that day. It could be literally anything from sidewalk cleanups to abortion care, information about abortion care, information about birth control, information about literally anything, about Palestine, about quite literally anything going on in your community or outside of it, big or small. Okay, we could be talking about these issues, making them accessible, and holding, you know, an hour-long quote-unquote sermon about these issues. You drop your kid off, if you have kids, at the, you know, child care. They maybe even learn a child-appropriate lesson as well, just like how we did at church, right? We hold lunch, or before we hold breakfast. There's coffee, there's, you know, talking and mingling afterwards. You get to talk to people in your community, in your neighborhood. You get to make connections with people of all kinds of different skill sets. You can set up different groups, like, you know, my family, we all did youth group, we all did small groups. My parents had small groups where they talked about things after the fact, you know, and went over sermons or went over some sort of, you know, external, like, furthering and getting deeper into those concepts and what they mean. And you know, there's a place that we can hold for queer youth, anything, like having access to therapy, having access to just so many things that we could do as a quote-unquote church. And I think what we're missing is just a place that is large, that is a place for everybody to all come together at one time in one space and convene and, you know, just meet in one easy, accessible place.
The bodies and minds of these women belong to God and to themselves.
Let them cringe. Let them fucking cringe. Let people watch you and literally be like, this is the most horrendous, most embarrassing, most just volatile thing I've ever watched in my life, and I hope they crumble. Let them. Their disapproval is a singular moment in time. And then guess what everyone does?
In the sea of modern monotony and imitation, the types hold tightly to their original truths. Antigone, ugly, dirty, and often drunken, will still bury her father. The elegant female, vapid and fading away to nothing, still feels faintly the fundamental difference between herself and her husband, that he must be something in the city, that she may be everything in the country. There was a time when you and I and all of us were very close to God, so that even now the color of a pebble or a paint, the smell of a flower or a firework, comes to our hearts with a kind of authority and certainty, as if there were fragments of a muddled message or features of a forgotten face. To pour that fiery simplicity upon the whole of life is the only real aim of education, and closest to the child comes the woman. She understands. To say what she understands is beyond me, save only this, that it is not a solemnity. Rather, it is a towering levity, an uproarious amateurness of the universe, such as we felt when we were little, and would as soon sing as garden, as soon paint as run. To smatter the tongues of men and angels, to dabble in the dreadful sciences, to juggle with pillars and pyramids, and toss up the planets like balls, that is that inner audacity and indifference which the human soul, like a conjurer catching oranges, must keep up forever. That is that insanely frivolous thing we call sanity. And the elegant female drooping her ringlets over her watercolors, knew it and acted on it. She was juggling with frantic and flaming suns. She was maintaining the bold equilibrium of inferiorities, which is the most mysterious of superiorities and perhaps the most unattainable. She was maintaining the prime truth of woman, the universal mother, that if a thing is worth doing, it is worth doing badly. End of Folly and Female Education. Recording by Alana Jordan.
The cool girl shit is over. It is weird bitch winter. There are no more cool girl personas happening. I'm gonna be weird as shit. Because I deserve it.
Original sin is an allegory of this eternal story, of the man who wished to act for himself, to substitute himself for God, to emancipate himself from him, and to create, whereupon he fell into impotence, slavery, and misery. The mind that works by itself, independently of truth, works in a void. Its creative power is a means of working upon reality, but it confuses the means with the end. It is lost. This kind of sin of the intelligence, so akin to original sin, the sin of confounding the means with the end, recurs in every form as a force of inertia which pervades the psychical life.
All day and I get nothing done. I work all day and I get nothing done. Take some time to relax, you should have more fun. But I work all day and I get nothing done. I work all day and I get nothing done. I work all day and I get nothing done. Take some time to relax.
Listen, look at me. I want to be chill. But God has other plans for me. Okay? Peace.
If the Middle Ages was a house half built, the 17th century was a house on fire. Panic was the note of it, and that fierce fastidiousness and exclusiveness that comes from fear. Calvinism was its characteristic religion even in the Catholic Church, the insistence on the narrowness of the way and the fewness of the chosen. Suspicion was the note of its politics. Put not your trust in princes. It tried to thrash everything out by learned, virulent, and ceaseless controversy, and it weeded its population by witch-burning. But we shall understand them all better if we once catch sight of the idea of tidying up, which ran through the whole period, the quietest people being prouder of their tidiness, civilization, and sound taste than of any of their virtues, and the wildest people having, and this is the most important point, no love of wildness for its own sake, like Nietzsche or the anarchic poets, but only a readiness to employ it to get rid of unreason or disorder. We have heard of a revolution that turns everything upside down, but this is almost literally a revolution that turns everything inside out. It is a principle whereby the deepest things of the flesh and spirit must have the most direct relationship with the dictatorship of the state. The social machinery which makes such a state uniform and submissive will be worked outwards from the household as from a handle. Orders. Police administration will begin at home, for all citizens will be like convicts, and when health and the humours of daily life have passed into the domain of this social discipline, when it is admitted that the community must primarily control the primary habits, when all laws begin, so to speak, next to the skin or nearest the vitals, then indeed it will appear absurd that marriage and maternity should not be similarly ordered.
From a blind attitude over the theft of work Xerox paper for personal use, Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy.
Labor power is suppressed.
Because the organizing power of labor is the only real threat to a fascist government, labor unions are either eliminated entirely or are severely suppressed. Obsession with crime and punishment. Under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people often willing to overlook police abuses and even forego civil liberties in the name of patriotism. There is often a national police force with virtually unlimited power in fascist nations. Identification of enemy scapegoats as a unifying cause. The people rally into unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat, or so they show ethnic or religious, not minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, etc. Rampant sexism. The government of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are made more rigid. Opposition to abortion is high, as is homophobia and anti-gay legislation. National policy. Controlled mass media. Sometimes the media directly controlled by the government, but in other cases the media is indirectly controlled by the government regulation or through sympathetic media spokespeople and executives. Censorship, especially in wartime, is of very common nature. Propaganda is pro-fascist.
To be the genius of myself is not to bring myself into being. As the origin of myself, I am not also the cause of myself, as though I were the product of my own action. But then, neither am I the product of any other action. My parents may have wanted a child, but they could not have wanted me.
The Fallacy of Success by G.K. Chesterton, 1874 to 1936. There has appeared in our time a particular class of books and articles which I sincerely and solemnly think may be called the silliest ever known among men. They are much more wild than the wildest romances of chivalry, and much more dull than the dullest religious tract. Moreover, the romances of chivalry were at least about chivalry. The religious tracts are about religion. But these things are about nothing. They are about what is called success. On every bookstall, in every magazine, you may find works telling people how to succeed. There are books showing men how to succeed in everything. They are written by men who cannot even succeed in writing books.
So the very first Baptist church was founded in 1609 in Amsterdam by an English dissenter named John Smythe. You have this Church of England get established, breaks away, Catholicism's illegal, all that good stuff, and then you have these like dissenters who are not Catholic, but also are not don't like the idea of the Church of England. And John Smythe particularly, and his followers in Amsterdam, the thing they don't like is the idea of the religion being affiliated with the state government. They don't want a state religion. They think there should be separation between church and state, right? And
we'll see about that.
Yeah, theirs is less about like, yes. And again, this is not because of like, this is less about personal liberty, I think, in their hearts than it is about like the state will fundamentally corrupt the faith. Which it sure does seem to. Yeah. Might have been right on the money there, John. Yeah.
Only with difficulty will a rich person enter the kingdom of heaven. Again I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. Matthew 19:23-24.
A birth is an event in the ongoing history of a family, even the history of a culture. The radical originality of a birth announces itself in the way it brings the dramatic into conflict with the theatrical in cultural or family history. Theatrically, my birth is an event of plotted repetition. I am born as another member of my family and my culture. Who I am is a question already answered by the content and character of a tradition. Dramatically, my birth is the rupture of that repetitive sequence, an event certain to change what the past has meant. In this case, the character of a tradition is determined by who I am. Dramatically speaking, every birth is the birth of genius.
Cognitive dissonance and cognitive dissonance and cognitive dissonance dance cognitive dissonance dance cognitive dissonance and cognitive dissonance dance cognitive dissonance.
Hey, if you're seeing this right now, this message is for you, okay? So listen up. Ready? 1, 2, 3. You are a massive disappointment. And you know what? Hallelujah. Can you imagine having everybody in the world be proud of you all of the time? Oh my God, exhausting. All of these crusty little people with their scabby belief systems getting you to meet their expectations. Imagine having somebody who thinks that like a woman should go to jail for having a miscarriage. Be like, I'm really proud of you. You see the world the same way that I do. Mortifying? If you're not getting finger wagging from a certain group of bigotry-prone, goopy-brained rapscallions, then you're on the wrong path. Wear that disappointment like a badge of honor, like a compass to a North Star. May you forever be the bridge troll swamp witch that haunts their fearful little dreams. May your name be whispered with a little head shake and a tut-tut forevermore. May you sink into the comfort of being disliked like an old lazy boy, perfectly molded to your fat Jezebel ass and raise a glass. Huzzah to us, the disappointments, the burnouts, that they had so much potential. We're usually really funny, free, and...
We believe in the genius in everyone an artist, and everyone a scientist, and that creativity in community can change the world for the better. The Fun Palace's Manifesto.
Rationalism describes the belief that all knowledge can be found within ourselves, independent of sensory experience.
In Nietzsche's mind, the only problem was to see that the human spirit bowed proudly to the inevitable. We know, however, his posterity and what kind of politics were to claim the authorization of the man who claimed to be the last anti-political German. He dreamed of tyrants who were artists, but tyranny comes more naturally than art to mediocre men.
We are comfortable with confusion. We admit when we are wrong. We take risks. We are resilient.
The date and place of my birth are matters of causal necessity. I had no part in deciding either. Neither could anyone else have chosen them. My birth, when understood in terms of causal continuity, marks no absolute beginning. It marks nothing at all, except an arbitrary point in an unbroken process. Causally speaking, there is nothing new here, only the kinds of change that conform to the known laws of nature. Speaking in purely causal terms, I cannot say I was born. I should say, rather, that I have emerged as a phase in the process of reproduction. A reproduction is a repetition, a recurrence of that which has been. Birth, on the other hand, in causal terms, is all discontinuity.
Self-knowledge moves humans towards fulfillment because our souls were once in heaven, where they became acquainted with the forms or ideal versions of the world. All knowledge is therefore a memory of our a priori experience with these forms and is thus innate within us.
Motivation that comes from within, fueled by interest, curiosity, and values, sustains passion, improves creative problem solving, and preserves hope in the face of hardship.
So it'd be like a calm down corner for toddlers, but it's like a corner for grown-ups. You see how it's spelled grown? To go and do like complaining, because sometimes people need to complain about stuff. Like this guy is like, in my day, we never even had iPhones. And this guy is like, no one wants to work anymore. And this lady is like, they won't even take my expired coupon. And this lady is like, they used to have a thing in the store, but now they don't have a thing in the store anymore. And everyone would go, groan. And they would all groan. It would be so nice.
I've become
I remember I constantly was telling my father, I said, Dad, you just don't understand our generation. And I feel like I've become my father. I don't understand the younger generation. They don't seem to want to work. And
do you think
I couldn't wait to work.
Yeah.
Work for me. I started working as soon as I was able to because that's how I could get money to spend things I wanted.
Do you think it's they don't want to work because they don't have to, whether it's their parents or government kind of feathering the nest?
I don't know. Maybe they don't only want to work if work is really purposeful and they feel aligned to it.
Well, I would think at Whole Foods that's kind of a place where it's a purposeful workplace more than, my first 10 years of jobs wasn't because I loved the work, right? I needed the money.
Well, that may be so.
To symbolic kinds of rewards, like a paycheck, bigger office, your name on the door, your name in a brass plate, thicker carpets, all kinds of rewards all the way along. And so it's natural that we would keep on moving up as far as we can go. And unfortunately, that's a trap that kind of upbringing that we have gets us into. We get into this trap of thinking that escalation, that climbing will always pay off. And it doesn't always pay off.
Most people are average. Don't be so hard on yourself. The early bird eats worms.
We prove to parents qua audience that we are not what we thought they thought we were. Since the emphasis in this relationship is not on what our parents thought of us, but on what we thought, they become an audience that easily survives their physical absence or death. Moreover, for the same reason, they become an audience whose definitive approval we can never win. To use Freud's famous phrase, the civilized are therefore the discontent. We do not become losers in civilization, but become civilized as losers. The collective result of this ineradicable sense of failure is that civilizations take on the spirit of resentment.
I don't think God put me on this earth to work hard. I think God put me on this earth to be an excellent vibe, to have immaculate taste, and to be kinda, but not extremely sexy.
Symbolically speaking, the dirty misers who rule us will put us in a madhouse unless we can put them there.
How will you deal with the shame of complicity?
It is not the earth that imitates woman, but woman who imitates the earth. Marriage was regarded by the ancients as an agrarian matter. The whole terminology of matrimonial law is borrowed from agriculture, says Bachhofen, recalling Plato's remark, "In fertility and generation, woman does not set an example to the earth, but the earth sets an example to woman."
The rebel. What does he mean by saying no? He means, for example, that this has been going on too long. Up to this point, yes, beyond it, no. You are going too far. Or again, there is a limit beyond which you shall not go. In other words, his no affirms the existence of a borderline. The same concept is to be found in the rebel's feeling that the other person is exaggerating, that he is exerting his authority beyond a limit where he begins to infringe on the rights of others. Thus, the movement of rebellion is founded simultaneously on the categorical rejection of an intrusion that is considered intolerable and on the confused conviction of an absolute right, which in the rebel's mind is more precisely the impression that he has the right to. Rebellion cannot exist without the feeling that somewhere and somehow one is right.
I may be a dumb bitch, but at least I don't believe in trickle-down economics.
You prosecute the man or woman who steals the goose from off the common, but leave the larger felon loose who steals the common from the goose.
Capitalism is a corrupt prison. That is the best that can be said for capitalism. But it is something to be said for it, for a man is a little freer in that corrupt prison than he would be in a complete prison. As a man can find one jailer more lax than another, so he could find one employer more kind than another. He has at least a choice of tyrants. In the other case, he finds the same tyrant at every turn.
You don't hate Monday, you hate capitalism.
Modern working woman bears a double burden, for she endures both the grinding officialism of the new office and the distracting scrupulosity of the old home. Few men understand what conscientiousness is. They understand duty, which generally means one duty, but conscientiousness is the duty of the universalist. It is limited by no work days or holidays. It is a lawless, limitless, devouring decorum. If women are to be subjected to the dull rule of commerce, we must find some way of emancipating them from the wild rule of conscience. But I rather fancy you will find it easier to leave the conscience and knock off the commerce. As it is, the modern clerk or secretary exhausts herself to put one thing straight in the ledger, and then goes home to put everything straight in the house.
We're going to need to ask the committee.
Ask the committee. I am the committee.
I am the committee. Oh, 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 oh.
I am the committee.
A nationalist encourages us to be our worst, and then tells us that we are the best. A nationalist, although endlessly brooding on power, victory, defeat, revenge, wrote Orwell, tends to be uninterested in what happens in the real world. Nationalism is relativist, since the only truth is the resentment we feel when we contemplate others. Nationalism has no universal values, aesthetic or ethical. A patriot, by contrast, wants the nation to live up to its ideals, which means asking us to be our best selves. A patriot must be concerned with the real world, which is the only place where his country can be loved and sustained. A patriot has universal values, standards by which he judges his nation, always wishing it well, and wishing that it would do better.
To speak of the male's immemorial fear of the female? For the ego and the male, the female is synonymous with the unconscious and the non-ego, hence with darkness, nothingness, the void, the bottomless pit. In Jung's words, it should be remarked that emptiness is a great feminine secret. It is something absolutely alien to man, the chasm, the unplumbed depths, the yin. Mother, womb, the pit, and hell are all identical. The womb of the female is the place of origin from whence one came, and so every female is, as a womb, the primordial womb of the great mother of all origination, the womb of the unconscious.
Didn't know you could move like that. Two-step real smooth like that. All night get down like that. Turn around, make it bounce like that. Didn't know you could hang like that. Sipping on champagne like that. Turn up, get.
Every second of our own experience has to be measured through a relative and subjective brain. In other words, reality is merely our brain's relative understanding of the world based on where and how we're observing it. Most important, we can change this perspective at any moment, and by doing so, change our experience of the world around us.
I don't make art for validation on the internet. I make art because it centers me and stops me from slapping a bitch.
Didn't know you could move like that. Two-step real smooth like that. All night get down like that. Turn around, make it bounce like that. Didn't know you could hang like that. Sipping on champagne like that. Turn up, get ill like that. Didn't know you would chill like that. Like that. Like that. Didn't know you could hang like that. Sipping on champagne like that. Turn up, get ill like that. Didn't know you would.
Jokes about that bring it home.
The joke about women was there's a handy little thing called a wife. You screw it on the bed, it does all the housework and childcare. Takes care of you, too, right? The woman's equivalent was men are like linoleum. You lay them right once and you can walk on them for your entire life, right? Whoa. Those weren't always happy roles, but they were captured by those jokes. Fascist countries, and I call that the fascist feudal household, where the woman has to work outside the home and also do all the household work inside the house and all the childcare. Germany, but they didn't produce as many children as they hoped because women were so exhausted from working all day in the munitions factories and then having to do the domestic labor that they couldn't bear children. They were just too wiped out to get pregnant. And that would be the family ideal of a lot of the evangelicals and organizations like Focus on Family that touts the wonderful nuclear family of the dependent wife and children. That's also the family form of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Violence, inflation, power.